Good morning, people. This is JD. Today I'm going to talk to you about our economy system. Not about how our economy works, not what it means, not how this develops to that, this to that, but what it is. Too many people in the world want to label us, and we are very mislabeled. For example, our own presidents do it sometimes. They don't bother to turn around and look and see what is real, and they all take the shortcut. Our second Bush, one time, proclaimed to the world, we are a capitalist society. But yet we're not. He was totally mistaken. Yes, capitalism does exist in our economy, but so does socialism. So by that alone, we can't be a capitalist society. You can't be a capitalist society and have Social Security. You can't be a capitalist society and have unemployment insurance, which is controlled by the government and not a private enterprise. You can't be a capitalist society and have Medicaid and Medicare. You can't be a capitalist society and have welfare, which is supposed to be a temporary assistance for people in financial emergencies, which for some reason it is not. But we still have those programs. So if we're a capitalist society and we have those programs, but we can't be. Okay, then what about socialism, since I said a whole bunch of social programs? No, because you can't be socialist with limited government regulating the economy. You can't be a socialist with private people owning the property, owning things, owning business, and government hands off. You can't be a socialist where the economy is basically controlled by the individuals or the owners and not the government. Okay, so we're not a capitalist because we have socialism, and we're not a socialist because we have capitalism. Then what are we? We are what is referred to as a free enterprise economy. By free enterprise, it means, one, the controlling factors within our economy is supply and demand. It's not the acquirement of capital, because then it would be a capitalist society. It is supply and demand. Whereas in a communist economy, government does regulations and says how labor shall go and how work shall be, how money will be spent and what it will be spent on. Where in a free enterprise, you choose the direction you want to go. You choose how your labor will go. You choose where and how you will spend your money. So actuality, we are not capitalists. We are not socialists. We are not communists. We are something the world don't want to say. Free enterprise. Because free enterprise says you have the liberty and freedoms to decide your economic future completely. The only controlling factors in a free enterprise is supply and demand. Now you might say, well, if I have a free, I could do this. If there's no supply, demand for it, and you build up a supply, you will not sell it. Therefore, your venture will fail. And that is the part of free enterprise that's negative. But if you research and put a supply where there's a demand, your venture will greatly succeed. Example of success? Microsoft. Example of failure? The guy who built the car boat. I mean, there was no demand for a car boat. And the guy who made the first car boat didn't make millions. But the guy who come up with Microsoft made billions. Supply and demand, free enterprise. Both put their money where they chose. Both hired labor by the demand. and both provided supply, and both made profit. Now, the owners of the business, what they do with the profit, will decide what type of person they are. In our free enterprise, you could be a capitalist, which means you acquire capital, and you keep it. Or you could be an entrepreneur. That's a person who acquires capital and uses it to develop and further their ventures in free enterprise. A person could be worth billions and have almost nothing in cash. And that would be an entrepreneur, not a capitalist. A capitalist is a person who's worth billions and has billions in cash, in capital, in property. Whereas an entrepreneur will be worth billions, but his billions is in his ability to use and adjust or work the free enterprise. An example of capitalism would be the Ford plant. That's something solid on the stock market. Now, an example of entrepreneur is Google on the internet. You can't touch it, you can't hold it, but it is still something. So, if we were capitalists, Google could not exist because it's not physically real. But being a free enterprise, there is a demand for a certain type of communications, and Google exists. The internet exists. Supply and demand, but no capital, no real solid. Google isn't something you can grab with your hand. Where the Ford plant, I'm using that as an example, it could be any physical plant, is something you can grab. They make cars that go out where Google provides a service. And that is really the main differences between our economy and capitalism. Yes, capitalism exists in our economy, but so does socialism. But if you really look in every single economy in the world, various degrees of capitalism and socialism exist in every single one of them. You can take the most communist society, there's still some degrees of capitalism. Maybe very minute, but it's still there. And you can take the most capitalist society, and there's still some degrees of socialism. Might be very minute, but it's still there. In ours, both fluctuate. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. So therefore, we can't be either. We are a free enterprise economy where the direction that our economy takes is regulated by the supply and demand of customers. No government, no individual owning, no banks, no nothing. Just the supply and demand controls and regulates. And that is a free enterprise, not capitalism. Something completely different, but people in the world do not want to use the truth. Because if they say they're against free enterprise, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? It really does. Where if they say, I'm against capitalism and the capitalist pigs, well, that sounds different. But you see, a real economic system cannot be all capitalist, cannot be all socialist. And depending on how it uses it and what is the controlling factor, decides what type of system it is. It could be a federal system, it could be a communist system, or it could be a free enterprise system. The difference between the federal and the communist is government is maximally involved. In the free enterprise, government is minimal. Maybe sets up the basic rules, but the law of supply and demand and the entrepreneurship of the individual is what makes it work. This is JD. Have a nice day. I hope you all understand this.